We're really privileged this morning to have Bill Prince and David Burton with us. How many of you all, as a youth, were in 4-H? Here we go. I knew we had some. Great, great. Well, there's a new program that's been started. Program 4-H is not new, but what you're going to hear about this morning is something that is new. And I don't know of two individuals better qualified to tell us about it than these two gentlemen that are going to speak to us. And I think you're going to see that it's unique in its nature and something that Greene County can be very proud of. So, gentlemen, turn it over to you.
Well, I would say there's at least one qualified person here who's able to speak about 4-H. I grew up in suburban Denver, so you know what I knew about cows and sheep was hamburgers and lamb chops, and you know, and so I was definitely not an agrarian sort of guy. But I just want to say something, you know, real quick, that this whole thing got started sort of, I guess, fortuitously. Because this Republic Community Foundation, I guess, was in desperate straits for a speaker, and so they had to settle for me for their annual banquet. So can you imagine that? You have a nice meal, and you got to listen to me for 40 minutes or something like that. And don't remember all that we talked about, but I do know that we talked about kind of the juvenile office's continuing mission for collaboration and this idea that we need to get our kiddos, you know, connected in the community. That you know, as the old saying goes, it really does take a village to help these kids out. And the more proactive and more pro-social that we can be with these kids and get them involved in things that they might not be involved in, the more likelihood it's going to be that they're going to be successful on probation and not get deeper in the system, and so on and so forth. And so David happened to be at that banquet. And I mean, probably within 2 or 3 days, he was on the phone to me and said, "Let's have a meeting and let's talk about the collaboration that we can do." And you're going to see a quote up here in a minute from Commissioner Bench. You know, and he had mentioned this to me before, that you know, you seldom see kiddos who are active in 4-H darkening the door of the juvenile system. And I got to thinking about that, and that was right. And so Dave came over with some ideas.
Well, that's a great lead-in. I don't know how I beat that.
Yeah. That's my contribution.
I'm always a little nervous staying in front of a group to talk. I mean, Mark Twain said there are two types of public speakers. There's those that are liars and those that are scared. And I'm always a little nervous about standing up to speak. So, but, but this is a great audience to get to share this program in. And as Commissioner Bench mentioned, it is unique to Missouri. It has generated a lot of statewide discussion and interest, not only in how to get it going, but certainly in the results that come from it. And so we're anxious to see those results too. So just as a way to begin sharing, I want to introduce you to two of my real life friends in Republic. I've changed the names, of course, but John and Joe are both close to my age, and both of them have similar stories. They grew up with 3 siblings. Both of them had fathers that left the family and mothers that ended up in prison. Both of them have 2 siblings that are in prison and 1 sibling that's dead. And both of them really had life-changing moments because of one individual or one organization that invested in them. I'll tell you a little more about them at the end of the presentation, but keep John and Joe in mind because they are perhaps representative of a lot of the families and students that we're talking about here today. So yes, it is Commissioner Bench that often reminded us about 4-H members not being in county juvenile program, and we've heard that a lot of times, but it just never did connect until Bill was speaking at that event, and then we had a chance to visit some. But again, I love this quote that we always need to be thinking about some of the history that goes into something, and a text without a context is a pretext, and that's a dangerous thing. So a little bit of history first. 4-H has been around since the turn of the century. It's not just an agricultural program, although that is the roots of that program. And it's been in existence in Greene County since the early 1930s. Now there were some changes to the program because, you know, there were some cuts in 2011. Greene County Extension by state law does receive funding from the county, and that's the case in every county. And that budget helps to fund our office operations so that we can support staff positions that are paid paid for by the University of Missouri. So there were some budget cuts, and one of those things was that a 4-H position in Greene County was eliminated, or actually moved to another county. And so volunteers really had to keep the program going in Greene County. And when you do something with just volunteers and no one, no adult around to kind of guide it, you have some things that go wrong, that don't go as well. And we certainly saw a big dip in the participation numbers in 4-H in Greene County, from 440 down to 192 at one point. But we've already jumped back up to 442, primarily because of this juvenile partnership. As mentioned in the handout I gave you, and as evidenced since that time, this has generated a lot of interest. We've got lots of inquiries for new 4-H partnerships and programs. The university is already committed to fund another position, part of a position if we can find, and we have one community partner already on board. So we're trying to add another position that can lead community clubs that will give students that have been through the juvenile program a place to land. When they're out of the juvenile program, they can join one of these strongly supported 4-H clubs that are more in the urban area. We have found with urban clubs, we don't get as much parent participation. And that's why you need a paid staff, somebody to kind of direct that and keep those clubs going. So this Greene County partnership, we're calling 4-H for All. And you can see our mission is really safe youth, strong leaders, and productive adults. That's the vision statement for 4-H for All. And we're really using this program to help support youth that have involvement in or while they're transitioning through the juvenile justice program, and using it as a positive youth development program. Some of the goals include reducing repeat juvenile justice offenders, growing 4-H memberships countywide as those students move out of the juvenile justice program, keeping them engaged, and then also increase workforce readiness for juvenile offenders. That's something that our youth program associate and some of the volunteers have really been focusing on, is workforce readiness with the students that are in this 4-H for All program. And then of course the county is a master at keeping track of some of these students and measuring what the outcomes and impacts are. And of course it's brand new. We don't have enough of a history really, I guess, to know yet.
And one thing, we were fortunate enough a year ago to get a research management analyst over at our office, because we were just awash in data. What's the old saying? It doesn't mean anything if you don't measure it. And so one of the things that we have found, particularly when it comes to measuring juvenile delinquency and things like that, is that it's awful hard to put a number on prevention. You don't know, you sort of intuitively feel like you're doing the right thing, that these kids are going to come away from these programs, taking away a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But again, you don't know if you've kept them on the straight and narrow, unless they violate the law somewhere down the road. And so that's hard to do. So at this point, it's pretty anecdotal, but we've got Rachel Hogan, who's our research analyst, and she's a wizard at figuring out ways of analyzing things. So I suspect we'll be able to put some hard numbers to this. But right now it just feels right, and sometimes that's a good thing to go on, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we do have some qualitative stories and things already, and we do have one student in the GCYA, whose mother has some contacts with some people on our extension council, and she has already related to that individual about the change that she's seen in her son, that she'd sought different types of help for him, and those connections just hadn't been made over the years. And then he came home talking about 4-H. She actually contacted this friend, not knowing that she was on our extension council, saying, what the heck is this even? Is it even worth my time? And now he has been doing things on the weekends. He's gotten her involved in a service project. He's seems to really latched on to the whole idea and is really encouraged. So she, as a mother, is very encouraged by what she has seen. And that's one qualitative story, I guess, that we know of at this point. So I mentioned the GCYA, and Bill, this is, of course, Bill's baby and others in the juvenile office that are running this program, if you maybe want to explain a little more of that.
Sure. So Greene County Youth Academy has been around, as many of you know, for a long, long time, and it originally started out as a residential treatment program for boys at Foster's old nursing home, I think down on, was it Division? Is that where it was? Or one of those places, I can't remember. And then ultimately moved into the Mary E. Wilson home and into detention for a time, and eventually we did away with the residential portion, and so now it's a day treatment for both boys and girls. These are our deeper end kiddos. These are kids who are on formal court probation. They are probably one step away from a commitment to the Division of Youth Services, which is sort of, I guess for want of a better term, the juvenile equivalent of the Department of Corrections, although DYS is very, very strength-based and has some outstanding programs, and the kids who go there get good services. But this is kind of the last attempt we have to keep a number of these kids in the community and working. And again, one of the big challenges for us is that we have these kids from 7 in the morning, sometimes till 7 in the evening. We can get them to do pretty good things, but then they go home. And home is an altogether different kettle of fish for a lot of these kids. And so sometimes we can make, 2 steps forward during the day, and those 2 steps turned into 4 steps backward over the night. So what we have found is that for these kids to be successful, we need to get them involved in pro-social activities, not only during the day, but also things they can do on the weekends and after school and things like that, and programs that they can do when they're not with us anymore. And so the idea of having the club at GCYA with the ability to move into a community-based club afterwards, we think is really going to ensure the success for a number of these kids, that they won't recidivate and we won't see them again.
And there's been a variety of programming taking place there at GCYA.
Correct.
Everything. I know they had a cake decorating project that they all worked on and learned about for a while. I'm sure that was exciting for the boys over there.
Yeah, Justin Kastning is our embedded 4-H person there, and many times we'll inject fresh blood into the program, and then the kids will eat that fresh blood alive after about 3 weeks or so. Stacy's our director of community-based services, but they have that honeymoon program or period, and then it's the teeth are bare. We have not seen that. Justin's been with us now for
Since January, yeah.
Since January. These kids and Justin have a genuine affinity for one another. They're not perfect. I'll kind of ask him, well, how'd that go? And he'll just, some of these kids tend to use profanity like breathing and so things like that. But by and large, they have maintained an excellent relationship, and he's bringing in a lot of interesting things for them to do. And so far as I can tell, they're embracing it. So.
We're getting a lot of other 4-H parents involved as volunteers. That was a volunteer that did the cake decorating project. Other extension staff are coming in doing nutrition-related programs or gardening and types of programs, anything we can come up with that's hands-on and relates to a project. The end goal, of course, of this is getting them engaged enough so that when they move out of juvenile services, we can keep them engaged in a 4-H club. And in both of those experiences, trying to give them opportunities to participate in the fair or to take some youth trips, for example. Now, funding for that has to come from somewhere, and I know you often talk about funding within Hubble, so I want to be sure we're clear on that. The embedded 4-H position is half funded by the county and half funded by the University of Missouri. And so then the other cost related to that, supplies or each of these students is actually enrolled in 4-H, and there's a cost to that. The Greene County Extension Council is funding those memberships. And then we've just recently written for some grants and received one from the Dar Family Foundation that will fund other memberships, summer camps, and summer trips for kids that are in this 4-H for All program. So I know we had 2 this summer that took a trip to Kansas City with 4-H for a couple of days, which was a great time for them, I understand, a great experience. So there are several community partners and several organizations involved in funding this and helping provide these opportunities for students. And it's more than just the GCYA now. it's several things.
Yeah, so, we have about, 1,700 referrals every year that we deal with at the juvenile office, everything from running away from home to the more serious offenses. And, one thing that those of us who've worked in the system for a long time have realized is that, diverting kids from going deeper in the system is incredibly important, and getting kids younger is incredibly important. And so we are making some pretty robust efforts at the juvenile office. And as you guys may know, the commission moved down to the medical tower and were gracious enough to give us the 933 building, as we call it. And that's where GCYA is right now, but that's also where we have a number of diversionary services. And these are services that are designed to sort of offboard these kids before they get deeper in the system. So, we're able to work with youth and families without even putting them into the computer, because, what we find is that you put a kid into the computer, they get a statewide case identifying number, and that oftentimes is the first step to a life of criminality. So, we're able to offboard them. But yeah, so Justin and the 4-H folks have been working with and thinking of ways to work with our Teens in Transition program. That's our specialty court that deals with foster kids who are more likely than not going to age out of the system, without a permanent outcome. And we've had that court going now for several years. And those are kids who, while not engaging in law-violating behavior, still have a number of the same issues that the kids who are violating the law have. GEMS is a long-standing program that we've had at Greene County, which is our Girls Empowering Minds and Spirits, and that's a gender-specific program. We are also looking at opening up some of these programs to foster kids. So we've been contacting the Children's Division to see what we can do in terms of getting them involved. The one thing we have to be mindful of and careful of is we can't blend these kids. In other words, we're not going to put a group of foster kids with a group of kids who are on probation. We're not going to put diversion kids into a group with kids who are on probation. So, that raises the necessity for more groups and more programs. But again, we anticipate that all of these are going to come to fruition, and we think we're going to have pretty good results. So.
And probably perhaps open doors for other opportunities to partner together. However, the program might grow or expand. I know we've had, as a result of this, we've had requests for new clubs, both in the Northwest Project, Fairbanks, Weaver, Bissett Elementary Schools, and the Dream Center. Right now, we don't really have the staff to manage all of those in the way that they need to be managed, because again, they're urban clubs, and you end up having very minimal parental involvement in those typically, is what we've seen in the past. But we're working on some partnerships and dreaming about how maybe that could be pulled off, because we think having a place for these students to stay engaged with 4-H is a vital part of the whole effort. And Bill, you mentioned a lot of the referrals and the numbers, and so Justin started in January, and he grew up on a family farm. He was in 4-H himself, but he's also been a foster parent and has worked with the Missouri Division of Youth Services. So he certainly has a background that connects with this type of program, and is a pretty high energy person, I would say, and doing a lot of good work. Just a few facts about the program, a little bit. I may have covered some of these. The County Extension Council's funding the memberships for the students. Justin is working on sponsors and partners for this, and it spills over into other county 4-H programming as well. We've gotten some grants and things to cover fees, which is a good thing. And I mentioned the Dar Family Foundation coming in with some money as well. It's the first time in my 20 years that we've been able to get a grant from the Dar Foundation. We've applied some in the past, but they seem to really like this program idea. And this is some of the creative things that were going on. I know the students at GCYA had to remain in the program while Springfield students were on spring break. So someone in the office, maybe Bill, I don't know, someone else mentioned to Justin that they need some programming that week. So we kind of came up with sort of a spring break type of idea. We hosted the students every day that week over at the Botanical Center. We had different speakers and different programs come in and talk to them about workforce readiness and financial management and just all sorts of different topics we can think of.
I think the first day at the Botanical Center, maybe some of the docents over there kind of got an earful of what our kids are like. So again, sometimes there is some corrective behavior that we have to engage in when we get these kids out.
Well, I presented to them, and I was so enthralling, I put half of them to sleep.
When I think Commissioner Bench was over there too, presenting.
He was there by the end of the week,
Yeah.
so I think he ended up having a really good experience.
Their behavior was as good as any group I've ever been around. No kidding. They were great.
Good.
So it
It
improved
improved.
as the
Good,
week went
good,
along.
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
But we were thrilled to be able to do that, and we're already talking about what that looks like next year, how we could even improve upon that, or maybe even expand it in some ways. And, but I think, again, back on the financial aspect, this is important to know, and I loved Commissioner Bench's quote that we were able to use on our press release that you have a copy of, but just remind you that preventing one person from being incarcerated in our jail at the current cost of $63 per day, we could recoup the county investment in this venture in 254 days. So it's hard to prove a negative sometimes in terms of prevention, but I think we're going to see some of those types of evidences as we move along. I really do. And it could be a very wise investment, which brings me back to John and Joe, because I mentioned that both of them benefited from having one person, one organization connect with them and breathe into their life. It made a big difference for them as compared to their siblings and the rest of their family. John has 2 grown children, both are elementary school educators. Joe has 2 kids in Republic High School, top students, very involved. So not only did they stay out of jail, they've become very productive citizens with children who are really benefiting our community, and because of what one person did or one organization did in their lives. And so we're hopeful that in this case that 4-H is that connection, that 4-H is that connection that can make this sort of impact. So they represent, out of their family, 25% of the family that was impacted positively. Can we imagine what the impact would be if we impact 25% of the students that go through this program? That would be pretty monumental. And that is the hope. And I think one of these days, we're gonna have an opportunity to have some students that have come through this program speaking at a Extension Council annual meeting, or maybe coming to a commission meeting and speaking and being able to share, like other students do, about the long-term impact 4-H has had on their life and how it's led them to a profession, it's helped grow some of their personal interests, and it's helped keep them out of trouble because of that positive youth experience in 4-H. And that's our end goal.
Yeah. Sure.
Do you have any
Questions about
any
it?
questions?
You mentioned you think you have a great feeling about how the program is working right now. What are some of the data points you're going to be looking at? How are you going to determine if this is successful when that data is in?
Boy, I wish Rachel was here. You know, I mean, I would know.
I know it's a broad question.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're measuring?
Numbers are referrals to the office, I think, although there's a lot of factors that can go into to whether that goes up or down, but I think that would be one that would sort of impact on recidivism. The success rate of the kiddos who are on both formal and informal probation, we measure that, and again, I would expect that kids who are involved in these kinds of programs, that we're going to see a higher success rate for them. And then probably the third point would be the rate of recidivism. Do we see them back again? So referrals to the office, the successful completion of probation or informal adjustment or whatever services we give them, and then the third would be the recidivism rates. I think that's probably, and again, I'm sure Rachel has 37 other points. That I went to law school, I don't do math, so that's what it is.
We know it's just sort of anecdotal, or some of those qualitative stories, and I know with the 2 students that went with Justin and other 4-H kids in the region to Kansas City on the regional trip. For both of them, it was their first time out of Springfield. And so it was a big experience for them. And they got to do that because of behavior, because of some of their activity level, and that's held up as an example to other students in the program too. You know, this is an opportunity you can get to take advantage of based on your involvement and behavior. So there's certainly a big incentive there, and it sounded like they had a great opportunity, a great experience in going. And who knows where that leads, right?
And we always sort of take a big breath when we send the kids out into the community like that and kind of hold it until they get back. But no problems are reported, and I think these kids blended right in. Nobody knew any different about them. So. maybe Harold could share about his experience with them at the spring break, because I think, I know you made an impact on them, but.
Well, I don't know about what I did for them, but I'll tell you what, it was really a blessing for me. I didn't know what to expect, and I don't think they knew what to expect of me. And so I did not want to be too much of a sore thumb standing out in that group. So I took a seat over in the corner while they went about their activities. They had just brought in the food that they were going to eat that day. And they, on their own, lined up. No one told them to. And went through the line. There was no tomfoolery going on like when I was a kid in the line waiting on food and pushing it. That didn't happen. And actually, they didn't really acknowledge I was there. It was kind of interesting. It was like, I don't know who he is, but just ignore it. And so they all sat down and were eating. And one of the young men kind of looked up and he said, "Sir, why aren't you eating with us?" Now, I think the "with us" was the important thing there. If he just said, "Why aren't you eating?" that would have been a question I would have expected. Why aren't you eating with us? That "with us" told me a lot, that they wanted to be part of their group there that day. And I said, well, if it's okay, I'd be glad to. They had fried chicken. You tell a Baptist fried chicken. So I got my food, and I went back and sat down in a chair. Another one said, "You're not eating with us. Come to the table and eat with us." Well, that was a nice invitation. And I just started eating, and one of them said, "Hey, guys, we didn't pray." And it got real quiet in there. And then another one said, "Well, someone prayed." And the one that said we didn't pray, prayed. And the conversation around that table it was interesting. It was all over the place. The kids really enjoyed themselves while they were eating. And I came away from there totally turned around in what I expected. And by the way, Justin wasn't even in the room with them. And they were doing all of this on their own. He came in right at the end because they had an activity they were going to do. And he said, "Okay, guys, have you eaten enough yet? There's still some over there if you want some more." And then I excused myself after that. So it was a good experience. It really was.
And they learned some workforce habits that were positive. They wrote thank you notes
Oh,
for having you there, and that was part of what we
I
tried to do
didn't
with
mention
each,
that, did
with each speaker to write thank you notes.
I? I got some of the neatest thank you notes from those folks. I really did.
Well, it's a great partnership, and it's something that is being looked at statewide. And I think that Greene County, at this point, can be proud to say that we've led the way on this, and since there is such interest. And I do want to take this opportunity, since you have a handout, and there's the initial press release that gives background on this, but there's also a couple other sheets on there that I wanted to bring to your attention. One is on June 13th, a leadership event that Commissioner Russell will be our guest at. And it's open to anybody. We'd love to have anybody who's available, wants to take a lunch break that day or can, and come join us for that opportunity. And then a little sheet about our Excel leadership program. And then just a sheet on the back, kind of an overview of Greene County Extension and some of the programs that go on. And just want to be sure you understand that there is a connection there with Greene County, that our funding for the office operations comes from Greene County per Missouri state statutes, and it is an important, vital partnership. That's how extension is done in Missouri, and extension is done nationwide. And the whole idea is about taking research-based information from the university and making it useful in the local community. And so 4-H is very much research-driven. The curriculums that are used are all vetted and research-based curriculums. It's not something that we just come up with off the top of our heads. And so that's part of the strength in 4-H, is having that as a background and the resources of the university behind it. And it's only possible because of this partnership with the County Commission and Greene County in general. So we appreciate that. It wouldn't happen without that. And I wanted to be sure that you knew of that partnership that existed. So again, be glad to answer any questions or we may have come to the end of our time.
They haven't given us the cane yet, although Angie's shaking her head over there.
I've got less than a minute.
Oh, does anybody have a question in less than?
What does the H stand for in 4-H's?
Tina, do you remember? You've been along. I'm not a 4-H programmer, so it's 4-H's are for head, heart, health, and hands.
So,
Yeah, and so that represents different types of projects and different things that can be done within 4-H. There is a big emphasis on health.
I thought it was all agriculture. I mean, I just thought it was people, show sheep at the fair and stuff like that. But then, we've come to realize that, gosh, they're into robotics and health things and career development. It's a pretty wide palette of services.
And you mentioned robotics. We did get a grant to purchase a whole robotics kit that is staying at the juvenile office and teaching them some programming with.
Actually, I might develop a killer robot or something, a transformer or something.
And there are 4-H competitions that go with that robotics, and that's kind of, I think, a goal of Justin's, maybe to have a group or a team that can be in a contest with that, so. Well, again, thank you for the opportunity, appreciate it.